Support for this podcast and the following message come from Corient. Corient provides wealth management services centered around you. They focus on exceeding expectations, simplifying lives, and establishing legacies that last for generations. Leverage their exclusive network of experts to help achieve your personal and professional financial goals. As one of the largest integrated fee-only registered investment advisors in the U.S., Corient has experienced teams who can craft custom solutions designed to help you reach your financial goals, no matter how complex. Real wealth requires real solutions. Connect to a wealth advisor today at Corient.com.
Welcome to Spotcast. This is episode 62, first episode of season 3, or something like that. I don't know. We're back. That's all that matters. It doesn't matter. My name is Timothy. I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Jonathan Kuline in Mr. Mississauga.
Hello.
And we also have Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
The Tazuni, which is, secret code for United States. Anyway, yeah, we're back. It's been a while. A couple of things we can talk about. We'll talk about in the follow up in a minute. Jaime, you have a really old fact check from like way bygone days.
Yeah, so I thought this was interesting to note. There is a ship in Picard, and I don't want to spoil it necessarily, but I guess you're listening to this show. This isn't too much of a spoiler. There is a USS Zhenghe, which was how one character pronounced the name of the ship. And I asked a significant other who does actually speak Chinese and who this person is, and she said, and I'm going to do my best to pronounce this as close to the way they said it, it's Zhenghua, which apparently is named after the Chinese equivalent of Christopher Columbus. So he was an explorer from China.
He came to Europe and threw the spaghetti at them?
I didn't get, well, I might have gotten details, but in our hiatus, I probably have forgotten where he went. But I do know that they were, roughly culturally the equivalent of Christopher Columbus, so an explorer from China.
Well, and our other fact check here is from me. I looked at this a minute ago, and it's been so long since we've been doing this show that I've forgotten what the fact check is. But then I just remembered that we were talking about, it was the last time we recorded was the anniversary of the rollout of the new Doctor Who series, and the star of that show was Christopher Eccleston, which I couldn't remember the name of, but that's him.
Short-lived star.
Yeah, and so we'll dig into the headlines. I just want to, this is sort of a headline, sort of a follow-up, sort of a little bit of, factoid. I have been happily putting the Spotcast episodes, the Picard episodes, I should say, on YouTube. They're all up there, all 10 of them or whatever it was. And it's interesting because one of the reasons I wanted to put it up there was because you can actually get, people have asked for transcriptions, right? And YouTube has this facility where the AI will go through and it'll make transcriptions, which is really funny to hear what comes out of Kuline and Jaime, right? As you can imagine, right? As well as all the other things that we pronounce or mispronounce on the show. So it's fun to sit there and watch the AI go through, and you can actually go through after. I can go through as the publisher and correct them if I feel like it. But what was interesting was I put a bunch of them up, and somebody must have turned on the Korean subtitles because one of the first episodes came up with Korean. So you can watch Spock, or you can listen to Spotcast and read the Korean subtitles. So that's another side effect of the AI. Is whatever language you speak, you can listen to our show. And I don't know if I ever told you this, but yeah, I think I asked you guys. There was another episode, another podcast called Spotcast out there when I was Googling around, and I'm like, what? Somebody's taking our name? What's going on here, right? And it turned out it was actually a single episode of a German podcast and I used the translation facility in Google or YouTube to transcribe that into English so I could see what they were, and it just seemed to me like they were just rambling. So I'm not sure if I've sent it over to another friend of mine who speaks German to see what she thinks, but I think they use the names of other podcasts to sort of like, I guess, to troll the success of them, and like as a sort of cheap social networking gimmick to try and get more listeners. But anyway, I hope it works for them. But because they only talk about Spotcast and Kirk and Spock in like 10 minutes, and then they ramble on about other things.
So does that work? Can we do that too? Can we start just what's a really good podcast people listen to that we can pillage and loot?
Yeah, the Accidental Tech Podcast. No, or more than just code. We could do it. Mind you, we mention Spotcast all the time. I think we've convinced a few fans to come over from there. By the way, this is something we could think about doing. Like we on our own show on More Than Just Code, we have a number of loyal fans, right? And the problem with Twitter and Facebook and those kind of vehicles for connecting with us is people just don't. I mean, the few people, there's some loyal fans who use the Ask MTJC or the Ask. Nobody's used the Ask Spotcast thing so far, but I mean, if you wanted to come over and talk to Jonathan about comic books, or you wanted to talk to Jaime about what the best video game in the 1990s was, you could come join our Slack channel. What do you guys think?
I would love to talk comics. I'm in.
Crickets. I hear crickets. Yeah, so we have a friend of the show. Anyway, I'll post a link to it. If you just come over to the MTJC site, there's a link there. We ask a skill testing question. What's the answer, Jaime?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty nice to see the community.
No, what's the answer to the skill testing question?
Sorry,
if it's not 42, you're doing it wrong.
Well, actually, that could be the whatever. Yeah,
the answer to the question is 42.
That would be. I did not know that's what it would be, but that's just given the meme. That's what I just guess all the time.
So we'll do that. We'll do that as well. It's got to be something. What do we say on we transporting at home? We say here, right?
Yeah. So transporting at home.
Yeah. The skill testing question from More Than Just Code fans is what are you doing when you're at home, right? Or where are you driving? I should say, right?
Where are you driving when you're at home?
Yeah. So they're driving at home. It all comes out of something that Jaime misspoke once and became a catchphrase on our show.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you transporting at home, anyway, and it's become a catchphrase on this show too. Anyway, so yeah, let's move on. So if you're interested in I'll put a link in the show notes for the Slack channel for the one or two people of you out there that wants to join us. All right, and so another quick one was again when I was googling around, I was trying to look for that podcast for this friend of mine who finally surfaced and said she would listen to the show. So I googled Spotcast, and sure enough, we showed up again in another list, Jonathan.
Another list, you say?
Another list, yes. And this is on the player.fm. It's funny because when I found it, we were like quite high on the list, and I've come back to it now, and we seem to be much lower. But this is I don't know if it's like their AI does this but Picard podcasts were listed under, which is not surprising. And we're like maybe 9 or 10 listings in there. But anyway, we're on the list. We were higher on the list when I first found this thing, but I don't know how their algorithm works. But there you go. That's it for me on the headlines. Take it away, Jonathan.
Cool. All right. Well, we got a little bit of a headline here. It was announced today that we're going to get a John Wick 5. We already knew we were getting a 4, and
I'm thinking I'm back.
Yeah, that's right. He's back, and he's back again. He will be back. They're going to film episodes 4 and 5, or chapters 4 and 5, I guess more specifically, because John Wick does a chaptering in its titles next year, assuming, of course, they can actually get everybody together and safely film. But that's exciting. I think I don't know if you guys are fans of the franchise, but they're certainly very open-ended at the end of 3 as to where they could go next, and to know that they're going to keep rolling them out is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is pretty neat. It's just one of those continuing character sort of thing where it's kind of like a James Bond-esque thing where you can have adventures, but there is a little bit more of a through line from these first 3 films, and kind of curious where they end up taking it for the next ones.
Yep, more dogs, more cars, more explosions. The next thing I got in here is we got news this week, and from the world of speaking of the world of COVID, that we're going to get Mulan, the anticipated Disney live action adaptation of their cartoon, is going to be showing up on Disney Plus instead of in theaters. This is huge because this is a $200 million movie. They spent a lot of money to make this, and it was expected to be a big tentpole for Disney this summer between doing the Marvel movies and everything else. The fact that they're going to put it onto Disney Plus is a big deal, and it's not quite the same as they did with a few of the other things. They've rolled a few things out quickly over the past few months as we've all been, spending more time at home due to the pandemic. And we've gotten a little bit more of the, we got Frozen 2 came a little faster. The last Star Wars Episode 9 came a little faster. The Hamilton, the filmed version of Hamilton was supposed to be a theatrical release next year, and they ended up putting that on Disney Plus. But this one is the first sort of big budget production that they're going to do that with. And what they've decided to do is they're going to charge $29.99 or $29.95 US, and then people will have unlimited viewings of it on their Disney Plus. So it doesn't come free with your service. It doesn't come under the umbrella of the rest of what you're paying for. but it will be available that way. And I mean, you think about those type of movies, especially a Disney movie, chances are you were going to take your kids, your family, all 4 of you were going to go, 3, 4, 5 of you were going to go. Now it's $30. That's probably a lot less than you were going to pay if you were going to go see it in a movie theater. Now, obviously, it's not quite the event day out that you would get out of that, but at the same time, you could argue it's a pretty good value, especially because it's now, after that, it's yours to view as many times as you like, and then knowing kids and their Disney movies, that can be worth it. What do you guys think of this trend?
Between, I was going to say, so is anybody on this show going to go watch that movie?
I wasn't really keen on it because I'm actually a fan of the original. I thought the original was excellent.
Okay, I haven't seen the original either, so
yeah, I think Disney did a sort of a run of really great movies in the 90s that hold up really, really well, and I think Mulan is one of them. I think that was an outstanding movie at the time. So, I mean, obviously, they'll do a good job. I've seen a few of the live action adaptations they've done over the past few years, and they're quite good. But I love the animated version, so for me, it's not really an enticement. And also, again, I have 2 sons. They're both in their mid-teens. They don't really have a huge interest in that, so $30 for me isn't really worth it. If it showed up 6 months from now or a year from now on Disney Plus, I might give it a look, but it wasn't really a priority for me. That being said, if they did the same thing for the sake of argument with Black Widow, I would absolutely pay that. But,
oh, you would? Okay, yeah. Yep. I did watch the Will Wheaton one, not Will Wheaton, Will Smith one, Aladdin, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was okay.
I watched the Beauty and the Beast one. I've seen a few of them, and
I haven't seen that live action one of that one. Yeah,
they're fine. They're they're good for what they are. I mean, again, completely in my mind unnecessary. I think the original Beauty and the Beast is a masterpiece. It's a beautifully well-made movie. I mean, not just a cartoon; it's a well-made movie. So I didn't think it's necessary, but sure, if they want to, people will clearly go. They're making a ton of money off them, so what the hell? How about you, Jaime? What do you think of this trend?
Yeah, so let me talk about the particular movie first, and then the trend, because I think the answers are a little different. So I have not gone on to Disney Plus. The context for those of you who are following along is it's just me, my significant other. We do not have any children. So for our household, I'm sort of the only one who's interested in Mandalorian, and the discussions were very, very deep, and we almost crossed the line to subscribe for Hamilton, and it just didn't make the bar when we talked about it, right? So for me, the $29, the $30, let's call it $30 here, is kind of weird because as I understand it, it is a purchase, but it's a purchase that works as long as you have Disney Plus, which is sort of weird considering that they have Movies Anywhere that's supposed to let you, buy and then register, from any of the other ones. So I'm a little less clear on how that's supposed to work. And for us, the dollars don't really work out as well, given that it's a family of 2, and it'd be better if we had 3 and like the more children or other dependent sort of stuff, or roommates or housemates that you have, I think the better it works, right? Yeah. And so the math doesn't quite work for us, and it's not, this is a movie I was interested in watching, maybe might have gone to see it in theaters in a non-pandemic world, because it is one of those, could have maybe made $1 billion like some of the other live action redos that Disney has done. But it's not one that's driving me so much. Now, coming back to the trend, I think the trend is kind of interesting because of the pandemic, where, yes, I am stating the math doesn't quite work out, but you know what? If we started running out of content, it's like, hey, that $30 ain't looking too bad because it's new stuff, right? There pretty much haven't been too many movies that are new for us to be able to watch. That's not perfectly true, but there aren't the normal like summer blockbusters that we would have gotten used to because they've all been delayed for the most part. So I think this trend is interesting because it has a major property with a major player in the market saying, we're going to go ahead and do this and we'll see what happens, right? Like the Christopher Nolan movie Tenet is also like trying to figure out, what are we going to do? This is also maybe $1 billion movie. What are we going to do? Are we going to do streaming? And who knows? Like, I think it very clearly worked very early on in the pandemic when Trolls World Tour came out, because that was perfect, right? That's something they're like, hey, kids, I'm trying to work from my cobbled together work from home situation. You go watch that, right? I totally pay the $20 for you to go watch that. It's totally worth it. Sitting here now, as we've gotten more adjusted, I think the math is trickier, but I do think that this will accelerate the idea of eventually most films will be released via streaming methods, and then theaters are meant for more like the big blockbuster ones, and maybe revivals of stuff of like, hey, go see Ghostbusters 1984 again. Oh, Avengers Infinity War is back in theaters, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I think you're right. I think, it does depend on the content flow. Right now we're still getting shows that have been sort of, working on, post-production and some of those things. And they talk about, sort of working in the same kind of bubble environment that some sports are working in, trying to get some things going, in getting movies going, getting TV shows going. But you're right. I think there's going to start to be a little bit of a dry spell if no production's happening for too long.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I just watched a live stream of a concert of a band that I've seen a number of times, and they just went into a local theater here and did a live stream concert, and that was that was a pay what you want kind of thing, like pay nothing or pay what you want, and I basically threw them the amount of money I probably would have spent on a ticket to watch it. But yeah, so that's pretty cool. And I don't know, are they doing drive-in theaters where you are, Jaime? Because they're doing a lot of those here now, where you sit in your car and watch movies.
They are, and I think Walmart is opening up its parking lots
really?
around the nation in the USA to do that sort of thing. I haven't participated in any of those. We've gone in a much harder lockdown than is guided by our local state government. So I really don't know. I mostly stick to the streaming services.
Next, we got a couple of obituaries to talk about. We lost a couple of people this week. One of which is kind of a little bit sad for me. The creator of Batmanga, Jiro Kawada, passed away this week. Not everybody's familiar with Batmanga, but it spun out of the 1960s sort of Batman craze here in North America, where, of course, we had the Adam West, very famous, campy Batman TV series. And that actually spread all over the world, including in Japan, where American pop culture was very popular. And this artist sort of took that and started doing this very different take on Batman at the time. And it kind of was its own little world within Japan, but thanks to, of course, the things like the internet and globalization of information over the past 15, 20 years, people have really started to appreciate this as its own sort of take on the character. And there was a gorgeous book that came out probably about 10 or 12 years ago, maybe even 14 or 15 years ago, that basically assembled as much as they could find of the original run of those books. And it's really, really interesting to see how, the Japanese take on these characters. So yeah, I think, this is somebody who was sort of contributing in his own way to the Batman legacy that, of course, Batman's one of the most iconic characters of all time. And this guy sort of took it and did his own spin for the Japanese audience that was really, really, really neat stuff. So sad farewell to Jiro Kawada. And the other death we had this week was Wilford Brimley. Of course, some people remember him for Cocoon, very famous 1980s science fiction film. He was in The Thing, which again, another famous John Carpenter. The other thing that people remember him for, of course, is he was the spokesman for oatmeal for a long time on TV. So, let us all pour a bowl of oatmeal out for Wilford Brimley, sci-fi actor / old guy in a lot of movies. One of those voices you never forget.
Yeah, true.
Mm-hmm. I remember him saying the diabetes thing. There was like that whole series of commercials that I recall.
Oh, is he the spokesperson for diabetes in the United States?
For something. I don't even remember what exactly it was. I don't know if it was some sort of treatment.
He said diabetes.
Awareness. Right? Yeah, instead of saying diabetes, he said diabetes, which was, they showed that PSA or commercial so often that I just sort of knew him from that before recognizing that he was in these other things.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, what's next? I may.
Yeah, this one is interesting in one of those trends as well. So there's an interesting story here about the Snyder Cut, not only existing as it has long been rumored, but coming to fruition for Justice League, and more specifically on HBO Max in 2021. So the HBO Max streaming service apparently has seen how everybody has been clamoring for, hey, Justice League, it has some flaws. We talked about this on this very show, and there is a segment of the community, the fandom that said, hey, maybe part of the reason was Zack Snyder had his vision that didn't come to completion because he had to leave production before he was complete, and Joss Whedon was brought on, and there's a little bit of a tonal shift in the movie that you can see, and there's some reshoots and other things that we talked about. And for a very long time, the sort of like studio has claimed like, oh no, there's no way that it doesn't exist. Apparently there's enough money now to say, hey, you know what? I think we can put together the Snyder Cut and let's make it an exclusive on HBO Max and launch that. So I think that's one thing we can talk about. I think the other thing that's interesting to talk about is, as the pandemic goes on, are there other cuts that could be made of other movies just to fill the airwaves, such as they are when you don't have a normal production sort of timeline and studio setup? Could you do things for, hey, all of these editors working from home? Could they start making cuts of other movies?
Ooh, all right. So that opens up a fun kettle of fish. What do you want to see? What beyond the Snyder Cut do you want to see?
One that seemed interesting that people talked about, and I don't know if it was on Twitter as a joke or a real thing, but apparently there is a Schumacher cut of Batman Forever that isn't quite as weird and campy as the one we were presented. So I'm like, sure, I'd pay some money to see that, because I don't believe you. I think you're lying. So this is going to be a show. And more facetiously, I'm like, it's been 20 minutes since we've had another cut of Blade Runner, so why not? Here's another cut you can own on DVD.
I was going to say Star Wars too, yeah.
Yeah, and I think Mr. Lucas has done the cuts, recuts, and more cuts.
Yeah. No, I heard something the other day, but he has a cut of Rise of Skywalker. But anyway, let's leave that where it is.
So about the a Star Wars cut, because you mentioned it, a Star Wars cut where, like, not only does Greedo shoot first, but there's like actual extra CGI'd scene where Greedo is looking at Han from across the bar, and he's like, I'm totally going to shoot that dude first. Couple of very, very pertinent to this podcast topics. During our hiatus, it was announced that Star Trek Strange New Worlds is going to be one of the new shows that will eventually come out. It will continue the adventures aboard the USS Enterprise with Captain Pike, Spock, and Number One. So they've got a nice little video linked in the show notes for those of you transporting at home from CBS All Access on their official YouTube channel. I really, really hope that this is available internationally. Apologize if it's not. So it's got Anson Mount, Ethan Peck, and Rebecca Romaine, social distancing, videoed themselves from home, talking about this show is a reality. It's something that people had been wanting for some time, ever since seeing those folks do a really good job in season 2 of Star Trek Discovery. So I'm pretty excited to see when this will come. And I think it's a good deal. And it kind of felt like it had to happen, because they made those beautiful sets, updated modern sets for the bridge of the Enterprise. Like, why not reuse that for something? You already spent the budget.
So it's not going to be them sitting in their own personal spacecraft.
That's right. They're all going to be on their own shuttlecraft for the first season. Yeah. So I think the other thing to factor in on this is just, I think, the overwhelming response that Discovery Season 2 had to Anson Mount particularly, but all three of them in their roles. I think all of us really, really took to the portrayal of Captain Pike, and so I think it's very exciting to see that. Yep. That we'll get more of that.
Yeah, sure, cool. And there was sort of that interplay between Number One and Spock too, which is kind of interesting.
Well, they did that one extra, the short track, right? Which with the two of them and the elevator, which I thought was really good.
The turbo lift.
The turbo lift. Yes. Oh, we couldn't call it an elevator. That's ridiculous.
No, exactly. Especially since it goes sideways too, right?
That's right. Shouldn't it be called a turbo slider if it goes sideways too?
Yeah, and speaking of Discovery, during the hiatus, we did get the teaser, and that gives us us the official premiere date for season 3 of Discovery. So that'll be starting up on October 15th of 2020, and apparently goes through till January 7th of 2021. And when you do the math for, sort of the main topic of today's show, Star Trek Lower Decks season 1, those 10 weeks plus Discovery's, 13 weeks, I think it is, adds up to 23 weeks of nonstop Trek, for those of you who are following that.
Yeah, it's pretty, considering how sporadic Trek had been prior to Discovery's sort of bringing it back to television. That's a pretty monumental thing.
Yeah,
indeed. So since I live in a country that does not have socialized sci-fi, it does mean that I'm subscribing to CBS All Access for the next, half a year, which is fine. It's fine. That's definitely something I enjoy. And I actually look to see what else do I need to catch up on. And I recognize from the playlist, it's like, oh, I still have about a season and a half of Twilight Zone to watch. Yep. So I'm going to make use of all my bucks.
Twilight Zone, like the black and white one? Or
the modern one from Jordan Peele as the executive producer.
I've only seen a handful of those. I got to go back and find them and watch them again.
Yeah, so. They are 10-episode seasons.
That's how spoiled we are with our socialized Star Trek and sci-fi. We don't care. We don't watch them. To add insult to
By the way, can I give you some cheap prescription drugs?
Yeah, that's what I'm waiting for. Is I'm not going to call in those favors, until I get sick. And it's like, all right, need you guys to ship me something. Call it, whatever gets through customs.
Right. So are we jumping to the main part of the show now?
Yeah, I think so. And it's a show.
Here it is, the moment fanfare.
Brand new track.
Brand new track. Yes, we have some new track, some new animated. When I was a kid, when it was 1973, I was watching the animated series. It was probably my favorite Trek until I kind of grew up and watched the rest of it. But so here we are, the Lower Decks Second Contact, ironically named.
Mm-hmm.
Season 1, Episode 1. We're going to talk about that now.
So we'll keep it really fast because it was a pretty tight episode. So we start off by our first look at the USS Cerritos, and we are introduced to Ensign Boimler, who is giving his captain's log, and he is rudely interrupted by Ensign Mariner, who quickly points out that the ensign should not be doing a captain's log since he's an ensign, and it turns out to be, of course, a big joke that he's practicing his captain's logs in the closet. Quite a funny little gag. And sets a nice tone. So we know we're going to get in, the goofier, the lighter side of the Star Trek universe. So turns out that they're at this Starfleet space dock. They're at Douglas Station. They're getting ready for the second contact mission with the Galardonians. This race, they're going in. They've already done the first contact. Now they're going in to sort of, start building on the relationship with this alien race.
Do the paperwork, get the contract signed.
Exactly, yeah. Which again was a very funny way to put it. So then we of course get a little taste of who Ensign Boimler and Ensign Mariner are. Boimler is a little bit uptight. He is sort of by the book. He is clearly enamored of the whole sort of Starfleet life.
He's the rimmer.
Yeah,
right?
very much the sycophant for the Starfleet way of life. Whereas we have Ensign Mariner, who's very much more sort of flippant and glib and sort of horsing around. She is chugging a bottle of Romulan whiskey. She's got a big container filled with weapons, including Klingon Batleth, which she proceeds to whip out and start waving around and pretending she's a Klingon until she, of course, drives it into Ensign Boimler's leg, taking a rather large chunk out of it, which immediately prompted in my mind as "'tis but a flesh wound." I also like there was a little reference where she says, "I got it off this guy with an eye patch," and I was like, "Which Klingon had the eye patch?" Right. I don't know if anybody else got that one, but
Christopher Plummer.
Yeah, I mean, conceivably, given their long life. But I went to how strictly you think about eye patch. I went with Martok, although that's sort of less accurate.
That thing,
right?
Yeah. Because he has his eye missing, right? Yeah, but yeah, it'll be fun to sort of again, it gives you a sense of what you're going to get with the show. I think it was a really nice sort of nod to this universe. The gags are going to be set in this universe. It's going to be a whole thing, and of course we are all armed with that information, so they can really go a lot of different ways. So then we get introduced to Tindy. Tindy is a greenskin alien, and she teleports, and of course she's a real keener. She's really excited to be aboard the ship. She's excited to be working, on on this, in this world. And then we meet Rutherford, Ensign Rutherford, who is cybernetically enhanced. So he's got, looks like his eye and part of his head have been cybernetically augmented. And he's having a little tough time controlling his cybernetic implants, and it's making him a little bit erratic. I think he says at one point it's a Vulcan implant too, right?
Yes, he does.
Yeah. So he acts a little Vulcan at times. So quickly, Boimler and Mariner take Tindy around to shore the ship, or Tendi, I should say, Tendi. And of course, he wants to take her to see the warp core, and Mariner says, no, you don't want to see the warp core, you want to see the holodeck. So they take her down to see the holodeck, and they go and they visit, Hawaii, and then they go and visit her home planet. And then as soon as Boimler leaves the room, because he gets called up to the bridge, they go immediately to the nude Olympic training program, which again is what you'd imagine everyone would do if they had access to a holodeck.
Right.
Yes, and this is an awfully realistic representation. So.
That's right. So then we get Boimler goes up to the bridge and meets with Captain Freeman, and Captain Freeman is a very, very Starfleet, the kind of Starfleet we recognize, the Starfleet that's very formal and serious, very, officious type person, and she calls Boimler into her office and says, hey, I want you to keep an eye on Mariner. She's, if she breaks any rules, I want you to come and tell me, and I want you to keep this between you and me. I don't know about you guys, but immediately I was like, well, clearly that's her kid or her niece or something.
Oh, did you really?
God, yeah, like 100%. So like as soon as she said that, I was like, clearly that's like, there's some kind of connection there.
Okay.
And and then of course, while this is going on, they're doing their first contact or second contact with this alien race. The first officer, who's Commander Ransom, that's Jerry O'Connell, Canada's own Jerry O'Connell, who gets back to the ship, and he's got a lump on his neck. And of course, anybody who's seen a few Star Trek episodes know this is not going to go well. And in the middle of Rutherford has a date in a sort of a 10 forward kind of bar on the ship. There is a outbreak of whatever it is that had attached itself to Commander Ransom, and then it starts to infect the ship. Everybody becomes sort of zombified. They're spraying black goo out of their chests and vomiting all over each other, and it's really quite a gross scene. And then we're cutting back and forth between what's happening on the ship, where it's starting to get overrun by these aliens, and down on the planet, we've got Mariner and Boimler are down there, and Boimler is keeping an eye on Mariner. It looks like Mariner's up to no good, so he checks in, and he thinks that she's selling weapons to the locals, and then accuses her, and it turns out it's actually farm equipment, that she is trying to sort of help these people who are starving to give them some farm equipment, and so they don't have to wait around for their trade agreements and all the paperwork to be signed and the T's crossed and the I's dotted before they can get the stuff that they need. And while that's going on, they accidentally end up face to face with a rather gigantic spider creature on the planet that starts chasing them down, and we start to learn a little bit more about the dynamic between the two of them, a little bit more about she's a risk taker, she thinks outside the box, he's very sort of straight-laced, let's get the heck out of here. There's a couple of really good jokes about, you can't hurt the poor thing, maybe they're using it for milk, you'll spoil the milk, right. If you rough it up, you'll spoil the milk. And of course, Boimler's disgusted, oh my god, there's no way, no way, and of course that turns to be the case. Cut back to the ship, and Tendi is in the medical bay, and she's helping out, she's trying to help the people to stop the infection. She's working with the doctor, Dr. Ta'ana, who is in there. She's a cat creature of some kind, cat humanoid, not like the character from Red Dwarf, and she is very serious. She's very McCoyish. She's got a real sort of gruff doctory personality, and she is telling them, strap them down, and she's sort of bossing Tendi around and says, here, do me a favor and hold this and pump it. And she's holding on to one of the characters' hearts and is pumping the heart for it.
And he's going,
ow, that's my heart. Ow. They go back down to the planet. The spider ends up to be a pretty big gentle creature. It starts suckling on Boimler, not actually trying to hurt him, covering him in this sort of mucus pink slime. all over himself. And when they get beamed back up to the ship, they find out, of course, that goo is actually the antidote for whatever it is that's gotten aboard the ship. They rush him to sickbay. They get that off, and then they use that to make a cure. Of course, the reaction from Commander Ransom was hilarious, where they of course give him the antidote first. He comes back and he's growling and snarling, and then he turns back to himself and says, "Was I eating people? How much flesh did I eat?"
Yeah.
And of course, the crew, the command crew, sort of pats themselves on the back. Job well done. We couldn't have done it without ourselves. We're all heroes, and we know that really it was the lower decks crew that sort of helped save the day there, sort of setting us up for they're going to be the unsung heroes of all this. And Tindy particularly is pretty happy where they sort of say, "How are you okay? Everything?" And she said, "I got to hold a heart." Like, she's really excited about the experience. Of course, it's confirmed. Boimler goes back up to Freeman's office once it's all cleaned up, and she sort of says, "So, was Mariner doing something bad on the planet?" He, having bonded a little bit with Mariner, says, no, she was fine. She wasn't doing anything. And so he gets dismissed, and then we see that Freeman is talking with an admiral who's clearly her partner, and then it turns out she reveals that, yes, Mariner is in fact her daughter. And Boimler is happy that, or Mariner's happy that Boimler didn't rat her out, so she decides she's going to be his mentor. She's going to help him to get where he wants to go with his career. And and that sets the stage for where we're going next.
Like, a couple of things. One is that Tawny Newsome is also a key character in Space Force. I don't know if you knew that or not, but he's one of the central characters there. But interesting that they've chosen another African-American type character to be the sort of lead of this show. And I'm just basing that on the actual poster for the show. It's got the sort of typical, layout of like they do in the Star Wars kind of things, where they have the faces of the people, and she's got the most prominent position at the top, and then Boimler's got the second position, and the other two aliens as well.
Yep.
I enjoyed the sort of Python-esque sort of play where the Rutherford and his date are more interested in what's going on with the date than the entire ship falling apart around them.
Yeah, good point.
That was kind of interesting little vehicle there that ran all the way through, like to the point where, except for the fact when he gets to the end and she says Andy says, "How was the date?" He goes, "Well, it was great until I realized that she didn't care about the diagnostic that I was trying to run or whatever." And she's and Noelle Wells, who plays Tendi, says, "Totally, 100% agree with that." Like, how could she not like that? Yeah. So interesting, and also that I was trying to figure out who these people are, and Jack Quaid obviously being a name you think of in the industry, he's actually the son of Meg Ryan and Dennis Quaid, right?
Oh,
yeah. So he's related to all the Quaids. The Quaids. There's quite a number of Quaids. I mean, it wasn't Rick and Morty. It wasn't Futurama. Jaime, while you were away, Jaime and I were looking at some of the reviews that people were lambasting the show with. But I didn't. I like it when things don't take themselves too seriously, which this doesn't. It doesn't. It's sort of the funnier side of. I mean, even the Lower Decks episode in TNG takes itself a bit seriously, right?
Yeah.
But this kind of sort of doesn't. This is sort of plays fun with it, and I like Ensign Mariner's attitude towards the stuffiness of Star Trek and the protocol. She talks about the protocols, and they're always worried about this and directives and all that kind of stuff. And it sounds like in retrospect she's rebelling against her parents, but that she seems to have a real aptitude for this stuff. Like, she seems to be like on the ball, even though she seems to be a loose cannon as she's portrayed in the story. And Bumbler is looking for, is it Bumbler? Yeah, it is Bumbler, isn't it? Oh, Boimler. Boimler. He's sort of looking. He's looking he's looking for her to be doing things wrong, because that's been set up in his mind, right, and our minds as well. And yet, when you look at what she's doing, she's actually going above and beyond, and sort of using the sort of her position to help the farmers. As like what she's doing with the what we think is weapons at first, right? Turns out to be farm implements, and she's trying to help them and deal with their stuff. So it's plausible, it's passable. I really enjoyed the sort of the space space shots, with the ships and stuff, and all that kind of tweaked the sort of sci-fi nut in me that wants to see the the little model with the smoke coming out of it, kind of sci-fi perspective.
Yeah, the opening credits were actually pretty darn funny too. The sort of everything, they're in all these situations that normally you'd see a Federation starship in, and yet they're also running away and running into trouble and crashing into things. And I mean, again, it's certainly as a first episode, I think you really get a taste of the tone they're going for.
Yeah, for me, I liked it. I do caveat it by saying that I am a Rick and Morty fan, and I think you're right. This is definitely not Rick and Morty. It is somewhat more in that flavor than, it's certainly closer to that than it is to the Star Trek animated series in the 1970s, right? It's a bit punchier, a little bit more comedic, but it's definitely not pessimistic the way that Rick and Morty is, right? Rick and Morty is very...
There is a connection to Rick and Morty, though, right? I'm right about that? Isn't there some production or showrunner or something like that?
They do have something in common that I forget, but you're right. So the styles of some of the quick beats, the like blink and you'll miss them references to other things. I think you'd have to go with a fine-tooth comb to find all of the canon references they've made. And I enjoyed how it was it's kind of similar-ish, if we can say, to like the Orville in some respects, but animated, right? Where, like we said, the Orville is, like an homage to 90s TNG. And this kind of feels like that too, right? It even takes place in roughly the same time period, just a little bit after Star Trek Nemesis. It has the designs of the ship and the uniforms and the sounds and everything else definitely feel a lot closer to that than they do, the time jump that we've seen in Picard or the bigger time jump coming up for season 3 of Discovery. So it's got sort of a nice little area that it can play with. Jonathan mentioned the intro. I really love the fact when they show in the intro these Borg cubes fighting these Romulan warbirds, and the ship just sort of nopes out of there and runs away, right? It's like the USS Cerritos is apparently not ready for that sort of battle, right? And that was really cool. And since it is animated, they can do things like the Doctor. My understanding, I've not really watched the animated series. The Doctor is the same kind of cat species that was shown in the animated series, because you don't have a special effects budget, right? You don't have to get wow, I'm doing really bad forgetting Saru's name. But you don't have to get you don't have to get Doug Jones, all gussied up in makeup to do that sort of character. That character is just as easy to draw as a human being is. So it's nice. It's fun. Quick couple of things that I noticed that were points of interest. One, Cerritos, I looked up what the translation is. That means small or little hills, which I think is quite appropriate for what it is. It's kind of a humble sort of name for a ship, and I think appropriate for the crew that we're going to follow. And Commander Ransom is, I believe, the same character as Captain Ransom, who is mentioned in Star Trek Picard. Oh, that's my belief. I think that's too. I don't know if that's confirmed anywhere in any media, but that is too close given the time period to be a coincidence, I think.
Well, I think it'll be fun to sort of play along with that and see if it goes forward. I do like that Jerry O'Connell, I think, he's married to Rebecca Romaine, right?
Oh, yeah.
So now they're both working in the Trek universe.
Man, that's wild. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Hey, Canadian actor does good. I mean, first there was Stand By Me, now he's married to Rebecca Romaine. Like, we keep track of that stuff up here.
In your newsletter.
That's right, in the Canadian newsletter, on the Canadian internet.
But he has a Canadian TV show as well that he just did recently, like a mystery thing where he's a sort of cop or something like that. I watched a few episodes of that this year. But he's been in a number of things. Wasn't he like a great American hero or something like that? Or
well, Sliders was on for years. I mean, that's his sci-fi bona fides right there. Sliders.
No, he was in this other show I used to watch in the 70s. It was
in the 70s. No, in the 80s. He was My Science something or other. There was one he was on here in Canada when he was a kid.
Yeah. He was a teenager.
No, he's say what you will, Jerry O'Connell's had like a 30+ year career in Hollywood. Like that's nothing to sneeze at. Just to touch back on we were talking about the connection between Rick and Morty. It's so the writer, the creator of the show, Mike McMahon, and the writer of the first episode, he is the head writer for Rick and Morty. So that's what the connection is. Yeah. So.
Well, he's the creator of the show, right? So.
Of this, yeah. I mean, alongside, of course, Alex Kurzman, who's the sort of overboss of all of these new Star Trek CBS programs.
So Jerry O'Connell was in Crossing Jordan. I remember Crossing Jordan.
I remember Crossing Jordan. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the sort of.
Are we going down the Jerry O'Connell?
I'm scrolling
IMDb
through his sliders. Yeah, you mentioned sliders. I'm scrolling through his IMDb. I'm just trying to get back to the My Secret Identity.
That's the one. My Secret Identity.
Yeah,
That's a classic.
He was quite young.
Yeah. I think he did that just after he did Stand By Me. Again, that's iconic role in Stand By Me, of course.
91 that was out.
I think this show was really excellent. I think I wasn't sure how the tone would match because Trek does take itself a little seriously. There's certainly funny scenes in Trek, but it tends to overall take itself pretty seriously. Although I feel like the new stuff, as much as it gets maligned for being the sort of darker side, the humor it may be darker, but it's certainly more prevalent, I think. It's certainly not the Orville, although it's Orville-esque in that there is sort of an irreverence, but I mean, that's not the right word, because there is a reverence. Like, the humor is based on your knowledge of Trek. It's based on your love of that world. It's based on sort of, taking pokes at something that we're all very familiar with and very much care about, but not in a cruel way. It's very much like, haha, look at this Star Trek reference, like it's kind of endearing in that way. I was sort of heartened that if they had gone a little too Rick and Morty on it, it would have been too cynical and too nihilistic for the Trek universe.
That's true. And by the same token, though, Trek does tend to take itself a little too seriously. Like Exhibit A, the Star Trek the movie motion picture.
Yes, yeah.
Oh my God, that was so pretentious. And then,
but then, how many movies later? Like by the time you get to the Star Trek 4 and Star Trek 6,
well, and then you get the Undiscovered Country where Christopher Plummer says you have to enjoy Shakespeare in the original Klingon. Little jabs like that, and you get the sort of Data with his humor chip.
And the double dumbass on you, and there are certainly more sprinklings as it moves on. I think they sort of humanize themselves a little bit more. I did find it interesting that given, especially that we've now seen 2 seasons of Discovery and we've seen 1 season of Picard, where swearing has become prevalent in the Star Trek universe, that this show was bleeped.
Oh, was it bleeped?
It was bleeped. They clearly said expletives a couple of times, at least twice in the show. Okay. And I was somewhat surprised, although not entirely, because I do imagine they're going after a slightly younger audience.
Well, you were talking, so you watched it on Crave today. I watched it on Crave too, right? The streaming version, right? And because I didn't notice that anything was bleeped, but I didn't notice anything. I didn't notice any F-bombs or whatever.
Yeah, I think it was more of an S-bomb, but yeah, I was kind of a little bit surprised, but then, I guess that would have been more to the Rick and Morty side too, if they had
So
that.
Let me ask you something. So I watch Rick and Morty a lot on TV, and it's bleeped on TV. Is it? I can't remember if it's bleeped when you watch it on iTunes.
I don't think so. I think it's unrated on iTunes.
Yeah, I'm not.
Because
seen it.
The funny thing about the show is, for me, is the bleeping. Like that. The swearing is so excessive in Rick and Morty that the bleeping actually works for me. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So I think if I just actually heard them say the words out loud, I don't know if I would. I have to go back and watch that, because I think you gave me the first 3 seasons. I think, right? I have to go back and watch those again to see the difference, because I do notice that Rick and Morty is bleeped for sure when I watch it on Adult Swim. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. No, I have to go back and watch this again. There are some cartoons and some animated series that I only ever have to watch once. In fact, some I've never even watched because I have no interest in them. This is something I could, if it was on, I would watch it again. And I probably will watch it again after we're done taping today, just for science, just to see what I notice again. But yeah, it was interesting. It wasn't compelling. Like, I didn't feel glued to the television and stuff like that. But it did keep my attention, and it was interesting.
It would be really hard, I think, to be more enticing in a 23-minute or whatever it works out to be 24-minute show. I think they've got enough hooks there to sort of whet your appetite and make you want to come back. I was reading a review earlier from a blog that I enjoy, and they got advanced viewing of the first 4 episodes, and they said when you watch them like that, when you watch like episode, they said it's even more enjoyable. Like that really helped them get a sense of all of what they're trying to do. Right. And they said, like, please don't judge it on the first episode. Stick with it. It gets better, and there's a lot of heart and laughs all mixed together. It is very Trekky. So, again, I not that the three of us weren't going to be in no matter what, but if people are listening to this and disagree with our take on it, I do think, especially given the format of the smaller show length, I think you got to give a few episodes before you really judge what they're doing here. Because the first episode's got a lot of lifting to do, right? You got to introduce the characters, you got to introduce the humor. There's only so much you can do in one episode, right?
Yeah. So can I be honest with you guys? And I think this will come as no surprise to the two of you, but I enjoyed this more than the entire series of The Orville.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. It's not like offensive in a new way. I think, when we were talking about some of the differences between the format that Discovery and as it turns out Picard were going for, sort of the big budget, very intense dramas. The Orville is more like 90s era TNG, and I think that this show feels closer to being like 90s era TNG in tone, even though it does have sort of the influences of something like a Rick and Morty, right? So I do think it is very very positive. So if you've been sort of hesitant from some of the more darker and serious sort of tones that you've got out of Discovery and Picard, I think you should give this a try, because this is going to feel a whole lot lighter, and it is only a half-hour show, 20 some minutes, so it's putting a lot out there in smaller chunks. And I think other than Star Trek the Animated Series, this is by far one of the shortest intros to like the whole cast that we're going to meet, and also it had to tell sort of a normal story instead of a two-part 2-hour premiere. So I think it's pretty well done when you look at it from that angle. Like I got a decent idea of all of the crew that we're going to deal with. Sure, we are going to see more. Like we didn't see that much about Shax, I think his name is, the security officer who looks to be Bajoran and like a total like warrior dude. Like that dude looks interesting. So I look forward to see what he does in future episodes. But they gave me enough to get I get an idea of who he is and his role on the ship, which I think, again, pretty well done for 22, 23 minutes.
And it's interesting that in every series of Star Trek, early on in the series, there's always a show where everybody on the ship gets infected. In fact, I've been watching Enterprise, on Friday nights. I think it's on, right, when I'm editing my other podcast. And last week was the episode where everybody gets infected, and only T'Pol doesn't seem to be quite as infected as everybody else. Even the Doctor becomes infected, so much so that he wants to take apart Mayweather to figure out what's why he's not ailing or whatever, right? But yeah, there was the episode with Sulu with the sword, and they all get that sort of sweat. It's almost like COVID, right? They get something on them that just affects all of them, right? So, and it's amazing that they did this in the first episode, right?
Yep.
Where there's so much mayhem going on just because of this, zombification.
But again, it's that kind of stuff that works, right? It's sort of the, how do we get out of this huge crisis? Oh, of course, it's the unlikely hero. And, again, there's it's not to say there's not without formula, but it works. I think as far as the first episode goes, it was thoroughly enjoyable. Certainly I want to see more. That you're right. I think there's, we see some potential in the characters and the dynamics and the relationships. They're obviously setting some stages and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, irrespective of how this first episode turned out, I was going to be in for watching it just to sort of follow along. But I'm looking forward to it now. Right. I also love. I wanted to raise a flag. Rutherford, the character with the cybernetic implant, is voiced by Eugene Cordero, who was a recurring character on Good Place. He was Pillboy. Was Jason's best friend in Jacksonville, Florida, and he had some of the best dopey lines in all of The Good Place. So really nice to see his career moving along and getting something like this.
Cool, yeah, cool. All right, let's move on to the watch list. So we'll wrap this guy up. Jonathan, you're up first.
Yeah. So obviously, we've been watching a lot of stuff, lots of good stuff to get through during the quarantine, and then now even when we're just sort of restricted a little bit. One of the things that has just popped onto Netflix that I'm really looking forward to getting into, hopefully this weekend, is Umbrella Academy Season 2. I found that show, I was a fan of the comic from day one. I really enjoyed that work. It's a Dark Horse comic, which I highly recommend people read, whether or not you're a fan of the show. But the first season I thought was really, really interesting. Filmed here in Toronto, so it's very recognizable for people who know Toronto. But it's also just a really good cast and very idiosyncratic, different take on sort of the superhero thing. Very, people with a lot of complex issues, relationship stuff going on, like very, very, deep pool of stuff. And then the actors, I thought, really, really nailed that first season. Really got the characters, really had some fun with it. It, again, a dark sense of humor, really doesn't take itself entirely too seriously, some good blowing up stuff. I think the first season was great, so I'm really curious to see. I know they did model the second season after the second miniseries or volume, if you're reading it in trade paperbacks, which sort of sees them travel back to the 1960s and have some adventures there. I'm really curious to see how they do that on the screen versus in the book. So definitely gonna dig into that, and I'm curious to see where it goes.
Oh, right. Rob, hi, man.
Yeah, for me, one show that I watched on Apple TV Plus was Mythic Quest: Raven's Banquet. This is the one starring Mac, because I can't remember his real name, from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, as one of the main characters, and actually a fair amount of It's Always Sunny actors show up in this one. It's about the video game studio who was going through sort of wacky work-life stuff, and they actually were one of the shows who did a quarantine edition episode as a special episode, sort of after the fact, after their first season was done, and it was brilliant because it fit in quite well with not only staying true to the characters, but also it sort of made sense given what they do as a software development company that could sort of hypothetically be sort of prepared, in a real way to do that sort of work. So I enjoyed that. I'd say check it out on Apple TV Plus. It's a really good show. And if you don't,
so that's Rob McElroy, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. And he's a show creator, I think.
Yes, that's right. And the CEO is Rickety Crickets from Sunny in Philadelphia. Again, another actor whose name I don't actually know. But something else that I thought was fun to watch that's fresher and newer, in case I was a little bit behind on the Apple TV Plus stuff. Transformers War for Cybertron on Netflix is really pretty good. So it's 3D animated, but the character designs are done in the style more like the 1980s Gen 1 Transformers. Same sort of kind of characters, and it's really kind of cool because they've taken that sort of starting point and made it a little bit darker. So I as an adult and having the nostalgia factor, I'm like, wow, this is really good. I'm like, I wonder what sort of age level I would feel appropriate watching this with. I think it might be a little too intense for like 5-year-olds, but maybe that like 8 to 10 is sort of that sweet spot of like the lowest you would go, because it's not bloody. I mean, these are still robots, but it's not the pew pew pew, oh, they miss each other half the time sort of thing that you see in the 80s cartoon. This is like, no, like hands get cut off, people get shot in the chest sort of thing. It's a little bit more intense, and they did make it a little bit more sort of gritty and realistic, where the characters, instead of being completely clean like they are in the TV cartoon for the 80s, it's like, no, there are scratches to the paint, they have dents, they have cracks. It looks like they've been fighting each other in this war, and it's pretty nifty. It's this first chapter is 6 episodes. I want to say they're like 25 minutes each, so it's actually a pretty good, easy to watch in an afternoon sort of thing if you're looking to binge.
Cool. All right. And during the sort of lockdown between Picard and Lower Decks, I watched a number of things, obviously, that in the sci-fi vein. One of the things I watched was Avenue 5, which we haven't really talked about on this show, which is an interesting sort of comedy sci-fi thing. I don't know if you guys have watched it at all, but it's worth a look. And Space Force, so that's a Hugh Laurie vehicle. It's funny, sort of, about a sort of a cruise ship traveling through space, in the future. Space Force is another one. I think the name is actually something that I think President Trump started an actual Space Force. I don't know which came first, but this is Steve Carell's vehicle about running a sort of a new agency from NASA. Plays around with a sort of going to the moon kind of trip that we've seen in other shows recently. Thinking of the Apollo one that's on Apple TV. Interesting show, and as I mentioned, that our hero from Lower Decks, what's her name? Tawny
Newsome.
Tawny Newsome is a key character. She's not one of the main characters, but she actually plays a pilot, and she plays the director's pilot, and she's an army person, and she has a quite pivotal role in the whole series of Space Force too. And they both sort of end on cliffhangers, which kind of lead you to think that there might be a season 2. But I think if there isn't a season 2, you won't be crushed. But they're still worth watching. But surprise, surprise, surprise! I mean, we talked about The Expanse season 4 being picked up by Amazon Prime months and months ago. I watched all 3 seasons of The Expanse when it was on. That was like The Expanse and Dark Matter and Killjoys were 3 shows that I really enjoyed. But The Expanse was good. It was sort of a new take on the sort of whole spacefaring thing. It's about, people from Earth are sort of referred to as the inners, and then there's people who work on the asteroid belts. They're called belters, and there's a sort of real class division between, the people who've gone off and forged off a new life and the ones who stayed on Earth and that kind of stuff. And, the United Nations kind of runs the whole show. Went along for 3 years, has a really interesting plot, sort of starts off as a mystery, kind of, there's sort of this, I think I call it protoplasm or something like that. There was some sort of, thing that introduces a new sort of life energy to the world or to the universe. There's some interesting sort of twists and, characters leave the show early, but kind of sort of come back later in sort of, I'm going to say flashback, but not really flashbacks. You have to watch the show to sort of see it. So, I was a little disappointed when it got canceled, of course, and then, I hadn't really paid attention much when it got picked up, and it's been on Amazon probably for about almost, I don't know, it might even have been a whole year, right, since I started watching. But, I was looking for something to watch the other day, and gone through all the movies that came out on Amazon Prime recently, and I saw, well, let me sit down and watch The Expanse. And I sat down and watched it, and I didn't quite binge it, but I probably over like 3 or 4 nights kind of finished it off. It's 10 episodes, and it is really good. Like, it is better than the entire series, and just in a completely different way. But I mean, if you watch the first 3 seasons, it's great. I think it does finish off. If nothing else, if they kind of leave it at a point in the end of the episode or the end of the series where it could carry on or it could sort of be concluded, right? So, but production value really, really good. I'm glad that Amazon picked it up, put some money into it, because they did a really good job on this last season 4. So if there's a season 5, that's a bonus, right? But yeah, if you were into The Expanse at all, or if you're, and they're based on a series of novels by an author, I forget his name, but there's a whole Expanse series, and I don't know where they fit into that canon, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting show. Sure. Yeah, and that's it for me. So so I guess that's it for this week. And so if people want to get in touch with you, Jonathan, where do they find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram as @JPKNews.
And Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you,
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithAHair.
And I also am on Twitter. My name is Timitra, Timmitra. On Twitter Machine is where you'll find me. So until next time, we'll say bye-bye. Bye.
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 You've been listening to the Spotcast Podcast. This is Jean-Luc Picard. Shut up, Wesley. Sorry, say again. Just the tag. Gotcha. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spotcast website at spotcast.com. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter @Spotcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskSpotcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/Spotcast. You can find details on how to help us on our website, spotcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future.
right, so you know what I got during this pandemic, but I haven't mentioned to either of you? I told Xavier...
Herpes?
Well, hopefully not. I talked to Xavier a few weeks ago, but maybe about 3 weeks ago. I said, listen, you just turned 17. It's time. You have to watch Firefly. Or we're going to start mocking you the way we do Tammy.
Yeah,
and he said, okay, that's fine. I hear it's good. You and Grandpa always talk about it. We should totally sit down and watch that. Like, okay, fine. So we are now one episode from finishing that, and then the movie from finishing that. And it only took about 2, maybe 3 episodes, and he sort of turned to me and said, how did they cancel this? This is so good.
Well, first of all, did you show it to me in the wrong order like they did us?
I did not. I did not do the Fox out of order thing. I did show him or explain to him that there was, this whole scenario where they, of course, they really badly screwed up the order and everything else. And he was just, he just doesn't understand. He's like, I thought at first the whole sort of sci-fi mixed with Western was really weird, but like the humor is great and the cast is great, and I just don't understand how this couldn't succeed. And I said, you are welcome to the Browncoats, sir. We're always happy to have new members.
Yeah.
So
we aim to misbehave.
Yeah.
It's funny because I see the stars of this show on other shows, and I watch them just because they were on Firefly.
Yep.
And I want them to be as good as they were on Firefly. They're not always. Like Marina Baccarin has been on V and a few.
She was on Gotham for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, Gotham. Yeah, exactly. And I watched those, and again, I really like her as an actress, but yeah, she still wasn't like that character was so good. And the mechanic, what's
Jewel
her name?
State, she's Canadian.
Jewel, is she? Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
And so is Mal. So's
I watched a fair number of Castle episodes, but not the entire series. But and I've watched the entire series of The Rookie, right? And it's funny, if I had 2 minutes to talk to him, Nathan, what's his name? Gillian. If I had a chance to speak to him, I would ask him, how are you going to go back and do The Rookie season 2 after all the stuff that's gone down during the pandemic with protests?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you guys saw that. The Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the writers of Brooklyn Nine-Nine said they basically threw out all of their scripts for the season they were going to work on because they want to rewrite them all because they don't fit tonally now. Which
I mean, this is it. I mean, like the whole gist of the LA police force is all about everything by the book, and there are a few cops that bend the rules and break the rules and whatever. But this guy, Rookie, he's an old. It's like The Natural. He's an older guy coming back to the whole thing, right, and becoming a rookie as an older gentleman, right, in his 40s, right. But how pure and honest and whatever the whole police force is, and then like after what we've seen happening and still happening today, like I'm looking at you, Portland, just craziness, right? So
I think anything with a police show now is going to have to really think hard about how they portray that world.
Which is funny because, I mean, like, if you think about it, like, I stopped watching cop shows because there's just too many of them, and they're all the same, right?
Well, it's a formula, right?
Yeah, I mean, I watch things like Luther, and I like the British shows because they sort of they take a different perspective on things, right? But again, at the end of the day, it's always the same, same sort of thing, like superheroes without capes, right? And I mean, in real life, they don't seem to be.
Yeah,
right?
but then there has been, I mean, I don't know if you guys watched The Wire. The Wire took a bit of a different look at the cops and what they were willing to do, working on the street level and stuff like that. Like, I thought that was a really sort of unvarnished look at the cops.
That's a show I have to get back into because I watched season 1.
So good. Yeah, I
have to go back.
And the other one is the NYPD Blue, right? That was sort of one of the famous ones that sort of started that trend of, not all the cops are angels kind of look at things. And what was the one with Michael Chiklis?
Oh, yeah. But Hill Street Blues was good, too. That was another one where the cops weren't all pure and cold. Yeah.
But I mean, again, I understand, obviously, it's easy to cast them in a heroic light, and certainly there are many officers, working police forces who can be viewed that way. But as we know, particularly, in some parts of the world, that's not how people view the police officers. And certainly, I'm obviously using my inherited bias of being a Caucasian man, that's the person I'm viewing it through, and it's completely different from what the experiences of different people in different cultures and backgrounds and skin colors and everything else experience, right?
Well, I saw a video on I think it was on YouTube or something like that, and somebody, it was shot with a security camera off the front of a house, and it's a little boy. He's probably like maybe 11 or 10 or 11 playing in the driveway, and his parents have an SUV parked there, and you see the kid playing with his ball, whatever, and all of a sudden he stands up and he goes and stands right beside the SUV so he can't be seen by the car that's driving by, and it's a policeman. So like, and the caption is like, my son should be able to go outside and play without having to be afraid of the cops.
Yeah. What a mess.
Yeah,
that's not good.
Yep.
All right, and in other news, Jaime, your team got a name.
Oh, that's right. Yes,
the Kraken.
The Kraken, which is one that I was rooting for.
Yeah, I think that's the best choice. I mean, some of them were okay names, but Kraken, come on, that's badass. That's my new favorite hockey name.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that I think is going to lend itself pretty well to all of the merchandise. Right, you can have things that are sort of scary looking Cthulhu stuff, but then for the kiddos, you got like squids and octopus kind of things going on. So
yeah, no, I think it's a hell of a winner. I think that's a great name. I was actually joking with a friend of mine who's a diehard Philadelphia Flyers fan, and of course I grew up here in the city, so I'm a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, and both of us are kind of fed up with the 50 plus years of ineptitude that our teams have put forward. And I said to him, listen, I'm just going to put this on the table. We both become Kraken fans. Well,
of course
the odds of them winning the Stanley Cup in our lifetimes versus the two teams we currently root for, probably pretty good.
Yeah, I have to roll out my trusty old joke. I told it on More Than Just Code, and that my problem with Seattle getting a professional hockey team is that Toronto's going to want one too.
Exactly. Yeah, they had their they just played a game tonight in this sort of weird COVID bubble playoffs. They had a 3-0 lead, and they lost 4-3 in overtime. So
they snatched defeat from the
Toronto! Hooray for us! Well, at least we've got the NBA champions. So that's something.
Maybe they can play golf with the Rangers.
That's true. I mean, there's going to be a lot of teams on the outside, Again, could be worse, could be the Buffalo Sabres, but,
And how are they doing?
They didn't even qualify for the bubble, so...
Oh.
Yep. But boy, is it going to suck when tomorrow night the Montreal Canadiens knock out the Pittsburgh Penguins and we have to listen to gloating Habs fans for the next week until they get knocked out. Yeah.
That doesn't sound good.
Nope. You'll come to embrace the hatred of nearby cities like Vancouver and I guess San Jose would be the next closest for you guys, right?
Yeah, the Sharks and the Canucks are the two closest.
Yeah. Vegas.
Yeah, the Vegas is kind of a interesting one, and gives me hope that we could win a Stanley Cup not too long after beginning, because they did their second year, something like that.
Well, they didn't win, but they made the finals, and in their very first year, they made the finals.
Right.
Now, again, they benefited extremely from the way that they set up the expansion draft. They were allowed to acquire very good players and then go and make a lot of moves that were really beneficial to them. So, but kudos to them for really coming out hot out of the gate. But I think if somebody said to me right now, hey, Toronto can start just by drafting players from other teams and building a team, I'd be like, how much does it cost?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll never do it.
No. And now Jaime, can we focus our attention on getting the Sonics back there, please? Because honestly, I've been there one time. I am a huge booster of Sonics basketball. It is disgraceful that there's no team in Seattle.
You better believe when I was watching, I don't remember why some government official somewhere in Oklahoma was complaining somehow about the Thunder. I don't remember the context anymore, but I was like, yes, run them out of your city, and I'm right back here.
Yeah, we'll
on
take
the round trip.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, the gall of galls is that that team that left had a rookie named Kevin Durant. Oh, you guys missed out on a career of a top 10 all-time NBA player. That is just the most cruel thing of all that.
Yeah, people don't realize that, like Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, and they tanked for a couple of years to get those high picks. I didn't get to see very good basketball in the final years of their time here. So looking forward to them sometime returning, in my lifetime. But just waiting out and trying to, maybe I should start getting with Russian influencers and be like, hey man, can I pay you to like start an aggressive fake news campaign in all of these different cities that are sort of borderline as to whether they'll keep their team or not? Let's start this thing.
If I'm aiming my targets on anybody, if I were you, I'd start with the Sacramento Kings. Can we explain why there's a team in Sacramento but not a team in Seattle?
They were so close to losing it, and they huddled up and said, "All right, let's not lose this team." So I think Seattle ends up being one of the horror stories that if you're looking to keep a team, you point to and say, "We could be them if we don't find a way to get to the table." Yeah.
But then for every one of those, there's also the Vancouver loses the Grizzlies, they go to Memphis and continue to be the Grizzlies. So
that's true. That's true.
Craziness. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, I got to go because I'm supposed to be on call right now, but
cool.
Hopefully nobody calls me.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah. All right.
Well, it was good to catch up with you guys. And looking forward to 22 more weeks of this goodness. I just heard Tim's heart fall.
Yeah.
The good thing, Tim, is so tonight was a little unusual for recap, and then we had a little bit of the break while personal matters had to be taken care of. But these shows are shorter. There isn't going to be as much going on in the media because everything has slowed to a crawl. So I think even our headlines and picks and stuff are going to be rather tight and trim for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, if you're looking for a nice, light, tight version of Spotcast, now's the time to subscribe and follow us.
Right. Alrighty, we'll talk to you guys later.
Cool. Talk to you later.
See you guys.
Bye.
At Sleep Outfitters Outlet, great sleep is a big deal. Save 40 to 60% every day on every Sealy, Stearns & Foster, and Tempur-Pedic. Queens as low as $249. Customer exchanges, closeouts, and floor samples. Inventory changes daily, so come in for your dream deal today. With no credit needed financing, expert advice, and up to 60% off retail, it's never been easier to get the sleep and savings you deserve. Go to sleepoutfittersoutlet.com for financing details and to find a store near you.